My work plan for this lab looked a little bit like this. I began by taking my beef bone out and creating a mise en place for the jus. I then added my beef bone to a pot with the mirepoix. I let the mirepoix sweat and brown. After that was finished sweating, I took it out and put it into a different pot and deglazed the pot with a little bit of red wine. After the pot was deglazed, I then poured it back into the pot with the beef bone and the mirepoix, and then added hot chicken stock as well as hot beef stock and the rest of the ingredients for that, and then put that to a simmer and let that simmer for approximately an hour. Once my jus was simmering, I then started working on the pork shoulder. I had to use pork as a substitute for lamb, so I had to butcher the pork shoulder, and once I had that butchered, I began working on 2 centimeter cubes for the tagine. Once I had all my cubes set up, I then placed my pork shoulder aside to begin making a mise en place for both my couscous and the pork tagine. Once I had finished both of these, I began boiling a pot of water for the couscous and then started searing my pork shoulder along with onions, garlic, and ginger to sweat those. Once that was finished, I added the rest of my ingredients and simmered that for approximately 40 minutes. By this time the water was boiling, so I added that to my couscous as well and let that soak into the couscous and get it nice and fluffy. At this time I started working on the mise en place for my pork shoulder. So that looked like flattening out the pork shoulder to have a nice even level plane on the shoulder, and then making my mise en place for the herb rub. Once that was finished, I began putting the herb rub all on the inside of the pork shoulder and then rolling it. I had to substitute butcher's twine with sticks due to not being able to find any. It worked quite well. The pork held up and it did not fall apart. So once I finished setting that up, I began searing it and then placing it into the oven to reach a temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. While that was in the oven, I began preparing my roasted vegetables, then placing it into a cast iron pan where they began to sear with a little bit of oil just to get a nice brown coloring on them. By that time my pork was finished, my pork shoulder was finished, so I was able to take that out of the oven and let that cool, and then placing the roasted vegetables into the oven to get them nice and soft to plate with the pork shoulder. By this time my jus was done, so I was able to take that out off the heat and strain that through a strainer. After straining it, my roasted vegetables were complete and I was able to plate both the shoulder, the roasted vegetables with the jus topping over the pork shoulder with the herb rub. By this time my couscous and the pork tagine was ready, so I took that and I plated that. And after finishing that, I was able to clean my workplace and had a successful lab. Overall, it went really well. I had to do a lot of the substitution with the pork for the lamb, as well as substituting the butcher's twine. And with that being considered, I feel I did a really great job and had good quality outcomes. All flavors were good and as expected. In this lab, there were not a lot of allergens that would have to be considered. Some minor ones like vegetables or any allergens to oil, other religious ones like pork, but other than that there were not any allergens really in this lab except for maybe almonds and pistachios.